At my birthday banquet, Peihan, my prince consort, presented a painting of me on horseback. Yet when the painting was opened, what appeared before everyone was an ugly pig-headed face, hideous enough to make people recoil. The young woman holding the painting curved her lips and mocked loudly, "Doesn't it look very realistic?" Setting aside her status as a princess, having to face that ruined face of hers every day must be a true humiliation for Peihan. She blinked her large round eyes, her gaze full of slyness, clearly waiting to see me lose face before the many guests. Peihan remained calm as if nothing had happened. He slowly stepped forward to plead for forgiveness. Immortals and mortals are different by nature. Jinwoo has always been worshipped by living beings, so she does not understand the etiquette and rules of the mortal world. I ask your highness to be magnanimous and not hold this against her. I gave a soft hum. Then I turned and drew the long sword at my waist. With one clean stroke, one of her arms was cut off. Now she understands this princess's rules. Blood splashed. The girl who had looked innocent only a moment ago had not even had time to withdraw the smug joy at the corner of her mouth before her face turned deathly pale and she cried out. My guards were very good at reading the room. One of them immediately kicked the back of her knees. With a thud, that arrogant little fairy, who knew neither manners nor rules, knelt properly before me. The severed arm fell beside Peihan's feet, staining the hem of his robe. She is the celestial phoenix from Yao Terrace, the auspicious guardian of Great Yang. Just because of one joke, you dare treat her so cruelly and force her to kneel before you? Peihan completely lost his usual composure and roared at me in anger. The woman who had always claimed to be a divine phoenix tied to the fate of the nation was now clutching her wounded shoulder and rolling on the ground in pain. She no longer had the aloof arrogance she usually showed when looking down on all living beings. I laughed coldly. An auspicious guardian? Is she worthy? The instant Peihan hugged her and suddenly raised his head to look at me, a guard drew out a demon-subduing silver needle and drove it hard into the top of Feng Jinwoo's head. Feng Jinwoo had always called herself a phoenix fairy, yet before everyone's eyes she cried out in pain and rolled uncontrollably. As she struggled, she revealed her true form, turning into a red-feathered wild pheasant with mixed plumage. Peihan froze where he stood. So the auspicious phoenix you have all praised is only a mixed-breed chicken bold enough to deceive the imperial family. I threw the blood-stained sword onto the ground. Looking at the bright red feathers she had always been so proud of, I ordered coldly, since she cares so much about her appearance, this princess will naturally fulfill her wish. Men, pluck clean every feather she has always taken pride in. My gaze swept over Peihan's pale face and trembling body. The corners of my lips lifted in mockery. Use those feathers to make shuttlecocks. Every guest present today will receive one as a return gift from this princess's birthday banquet. After all, they carry a trace of immortal air from a mixed-breed chicken of Yao Terrace. Taking one home to kick around should be very respectable. What a pity she does not have enough feathers. Otherwise, making a feather duster to knock sense into those blind fools would also be a fine choice. Peihan looked as if an invisible, ice-cold slap had struck him. He staggered in shock. Holding the sickly chicken trembling in his arms, he raised his eyes to me and even his voice shook. She is a fairy who descended to the mortal world. Even if she is not a phoenix, you should not humiliate her to this point over a single joke. I laughed softly. If one benefits all living beings, she may be called a true immortal. If one brings disaster to a region, one is merely a monster in human form. She burned an imperial residence and threatened the son of heaven. What right does she have to call herself a fairy? Besides, a joke that this princess does not find amusing is humiliation and provocation. Someone immediately echoed. When she humiliated your highness, you were not anxious at all. When your highness taught her rules, you panicked so badly that you even forgot the bond between husband and wife. Is she your father or your mother? Has your family gone 8 generations without eating chicken? It is only a chicken, yet you cling to it and refuse to let go. Why don't you beg your highness? Perhaps her highness will roast it and reward you with it. One mocking remark followed another, making Peihan's pupils tremble. The painting used to insult me was thrown straight into the brazier. My maid watched the flame swallow the painting and turn it into pale ash. Then she said coldly, when Yuncheng was in danger and tens of thousands of people faced destruction, Her Highness led 3,000 soldiers through the night to the rescue. She met the enemy head-on and personally killed their commander. In the end, every one of those 3,000 elite troops gave their lives to force the enemy to retreat a long distance. Her Highness wagered her life. She suffered 7 blade wounds. When she was found among the bodies, she could barely be recognized, and her whole body was covered in blood. Of those 7 wounds, the lightest one crossed her face and destroyed the beauty she once had. But all the people of Great Yang know that it is not a flaw. It is a medal carved by her blood-soaked courage, proof of the loyal souls of the three armies, and the path of survival that tens of thousands of people in Yunsheng will remember for generations. It is not a joke from the prince consort's mouth, and it is certainly not something a mixed feathered chicken may use to insult her. Pei Han's face stiffened. He could not say a word. I slowly returned to the grand armchair and accepted a handkerchief from a servant, leisurely wiping away the dirt that had never existed on my hands. Then I lifted my eyes. Plucking her feathers is not allowed? Pei Han spread both arms and blocked the red pheasant behind him. Those feathers are both Jinwoo's spiritual power and her appearance. What your highness is doing is not teaching her rules. It is using power to bully others and deliberately destroying her. If you blame me for bringing her to the banquet, I can apologize to you. I did not know the surprise and the finishing touch she spoke of would be ruining the painting. She merely likes to play around. She had no intention of provoking you. Hearing this, I stood and walked toward Pei Han step by step. His spine went rigid like a sword on the verge of leaving its sheath. I sneered. With a sharp crack, the hilt of my blade struck Pei Han across the face with such force that he fell to the ground and spat out blood mixed with broken teeth. Using power to bully others? If that is so, this princess will not pluck her feathers. I will cut her up piece by piece and stew her into chicken soup to nourish you. The red pheasant lying on the ground heard every word clearly. Its head jerked, its whole body shook, and it let out miserable clucking cries. Pei Han held his swollen face and met my cold gaze. Jinwoo is still the auspicious guardian of Great Yang, personally confirmed by the state preceptor. If your highness insists on acting willfully, are you not afraid of bringing heavenly punishment down upon Great Yang? The surrounding guests began to whisper, all of them showing worry. I looked at him with interest. This princess is a descendant of the true dragon. Could I possibly be inferior to a mixed feathered chicken? Between the daughter of the true dragon and a false phoenix, who stands above whom? I would like to broaden my horizons too. I turned and drew my sword. With a thud, Pei Han knelt before me. His spine finally collapsed, and his voice was hoarse. I beg your highness to the proper attitude. The flat of my blade gently patted Pei Han's face. I laughed indifferently. It was only a joke. This princess also knows how to joke. I signaled my maid. Brush and ink were immediately brought before Pei Han. His pupils trembled as he looked at me in confusion. I smiled and explained, the prince consort is skilled in calligraphy and painting. Since the writing portrait you painted for me has been destroyed, of course you must make up for it with another one. This princess will let you watch this mixed feathered chicken endure her punishment with your own eyes. Every time a servant plucks one feather, you will record one feather. I also want to see exactly how many feathers this arrogant mixed feathered pheasant has to be proud of. Just as Pei Han's face turned bloodless, my voice suddenly chilled. She ruined my birthday and made me lose interest. That alone is already worthy of 10,000 deaths. Not turning her into roast chicken is this princess's mercy. If you write one stroke wrong, I will cut her once. If you say one extra word, I will cut a piece from her. Do you want to try? Pei Han stood frozen in terror. His thin lips moved several times, but in the end he did not dare say another word. A sharp-eyed guard raised his hand, grabbed hard, and tore a clump of feathers from the red pheasant's head. The chicken immediately cried out. Pei Han was so heartbroken that his fingertips trembled. Just as he was about to step forward, my blade struck down with a clang and stabbed into the blue stone floor. Pei Han froze at once. He knew my temper very well. In my manner, my word was law. In my princess manner, even if the crown prince came in person, if he was supposed to take 2 cuts, he would take both cuts. With only his own strength, Pei Han absolutely could not save a mixed feathered chicken pretending to be a phoenix. Pei Han silently bent down and knelt. Then he suddenly raised his head and met my cold, oppressive gaze from above. Ruler and subject come first. Husband and wife come second. Since you do not understand rules, from now on, everything will be done according to rules. In the 3 years since our marriage, I had never used rank or etiquette to suppress him, and I had never humiliated him again and again before so many guests as I did today. But 3 years of wealth, honor, and protection from me had made him forget that he was only a criminal slave granted to me by my father. He had forgotten where he came from, so naturally I had a duty to remind him. In front of everyone, his hands trembled as he held the clump of feathers in his palm. He separated each strand clearly and counted carefully. Every time a feather was pulled, the mixed-breed chicken cried out. Every feather thrown to the ground was stained with blood. Every additional feather Pei Han counted made his face grow a shade paler. By the time his body swayed as if he were about to collapse, I watched for a while and found it boring. I gave the steward a look. The steward immediately clapped twice. Dancers and musicians entered one after another. Amid songs and dances celebrating peace, I raised my cup. Since all of you have come to this princess's manor today, drink to your heart's content. Half an hour later, a maid came to report. It has all been plucked clean. Those feathers were barely enough for everyone present to receive half a handful. I set down my wine cup and looked toward Pei Han, who had been left to the side. His face was so pale it held no trace of color. Forcing down the hatred in his eyes, he lowered his head and asked for instructions. Now may I take her away? I glanced at Feng Jinwu, who had been plucked bare. A phoenix without feathers was truly inferior to a chicken. Without the proud plumage she had flaunted, this 100-year-old pheasant spirit was nothing more than this. I waved my hand. Pei Han pressed his lips tight, as if enduring the greatest humiliation. He took off his outer robe, wrapped the bare chicken tightly, and carried it out. Looking after that unfamiliar back, I sighed softly. In the end, he still is not him. There had never been a destined bond between Pei Han and me, nor had we ever truly been two people in love. I was born into the imperial family, the only legitimate daughter of the original empress. In my hands were the 100,000 troops my imperial grandfather had granted me. After 5 years of fighting on the battlefield, I had been the person the entire court tacitly acknowledged as the future heir to the Eastern Palace. Pei Han, on the other hand, was only a collateral descendant of a declining marquis household. His clothing and expenses were not even as fine as those of the secondary sons of powerful families. More importantly, he had the woman he could never forget, and I had the man etched like a cinnabar mark deep in my heart. Unfortunately, the woman he could never forget coveted imperial wealth and honor. Relying on the influence of the marquis household, she used forbidden drugs and stubbornly entered my father's imperial bed. In the end, she angered noble consort Wen Jin and personally lit the road to the underworld for her entire clan. As for the cinnabar mark in my heart, that man had once stood shoulder to shoulder with me on the battlefield and blocked an arrow for me. He died because of it. His blood ultimately dyed my eyes red. After that, my face was ruined, injuring the imperial countenance, and an arrow struck my abdomen. I could never bear children in this life. The civil and military officials opposed establishing me as heir apparent. Even my father began to hesitate. Before it was even clear whether I would live or die, he hurriedly withdrew the military authority in my hands. The position of heir that should have belonged to me finally fell to Chen Huaidu. My father comforted me. The words of people are frightening. I too have my difficulties. Aside from the throne, whatever you want, I will grant you. At that time, Pei Han, whose face strangely resembled the man from my past, had been thrown into the courtyard by noble consort Wen Jin and her son. They forced him to hold hot candles in both hands, making him a living lampstand. His back was perfectly straight, the line of his jaw was taut like a bow pulled to its fullest. Hot wax dripped onto the backs of his hands and burned countless blisters into them. Yet he seemed not to feel pain. Even the corners of his eyes showed not the slightest ripple. I had heard that he was a devoted man. He knew clearly that the woman in his heart had used forbidden medicine to climb into a higher branch, crawled into the imperial bed, and ultimately been granted poisoned wine while her entire clan was punished with exile. He was implicated and could barely protect himself, yet he disregarded life and death, braved the noble consort's fury, and went to collect that woman's body. For that, he was punished and became the living lampstand I saw that day. I suddenly thought of the man from my past. I thought of his willingness to risk everything, his stubborn devotion, the days of flowers before us and moonlight above us. I thought of how he had once been only a love-struck man who willingly followed me to the border for love, yet in his heart, he had carried a heroic dream and been willing to sacrifice himself for righteousness. Thinking to the end, my nose stung. After 5 years of blades and armored horses, after treating death as lightly as a feather, after paying the price of giving Great Yang 100 years without war, I was left with nothing. So my father's so-called training had been false from the beginning. From start to finish, I had only been a blade he used to clear thorns for the son he loved. What belonged to me, I would take back myself. What he promised to grant me, I would also accept. So I raised my hand and pointed at Pei Han. Give him to me. My original intention had been simple. Another servant would do, or another steward would do. In any case, it was better than letting him suffer humiliation under my eyes with that face. Who would have thought that my father, muddled in old age and unable to withstand the pillow talk of noble consort Wen Jin and her son, would send a marriage decree into the princess manor the very next day? He granted a marriage between me and Pei Han. A criminal slave was bestowed in marriage to the princess of outstanding military achievements. Everyone in the world knew this was an insult from the crown prince and his mother. Pei Han knew too. He lifted his robe, knelt before me, and let me decide his fate. From beginning to end, he did not say a word. Snow and rain fell heavily that day, cold enough to make the face I could not bear to forget turn pale. Suddenly, I did not want to argue anymore. Holding a jade-ribbed umbrella, I walked up to him and said, "I have fought for 5 years, and my heart is colder than a blade. If you cannot be obedient and sensible, then in this princess manner, I do not dismiss husbands. I bury them." Peihan's still eyes, like a dry well, trembled slightly. He raised his head. "I can do that." For that single word, he treated me with respectful distance for 3 full years. I held my blade with its rolled edge, supported the household of the man from my past, protected his remaining people, and secretly plotted for power and the throne. Peihan held a broken string chin zither, built a new grave for his old love, aided her remaining kin, and silently endured while making calculations behind the scenes. I did not care about the world's gaze, and he did not take the ridicule of the world to heart. We were like a pair of partners whose understanding had sunk into the bone. In court, amid open attacks and hidden schemes, we faced everything together. Every time the crown prince sent assassins, we countered them one by one. The most dangerous time, Peihan ignored all attempts to stop him and rode out alone to lure away pursuers for me. In the end, an arrow pierced his left shoulder. I scolded him for being foolish. He lowered his long lashes, covering his deep black eyes. "I cannot always be useless and rely only on your highness. This life was given by your highness. Naturally, I must do something for you." In that moment, I suddenly thought that life was long. Having someone walk beside me seemed not so bad, until he traveled a vast distance south to mourn the father of his former beloved, who had died of illness. On the road back to the capital, his horse suddenly lost its footing. He fell into a cold abyss and was saved by Feng Jinwu, who claimed to be a fairy under the command of the Celestial Lord. After that, she demanded that Peihan repay the debt of saving his life. On my father's birthday, she descended from the sky. On behalf of the Celestial Lord, she led hundreds of birds to offer birthday blessings to the wise ruler of the mortal world. My father was delighted. Feng Jinwu claimed that she was the phoenix mount of the Celestial Lord. Because she had to undergo 3 mortal love tribulations, she had fallen into the mortal realm, and her love tribulation was none other than my prince consort, Peihan. So while my father was in high spirits, she asked him to allow Peihan and me to divorce so that Peihan could marry her. In the deathly silence of the hall, she arrogantly raised her neck and looked at me. "Princess, helping me fulfill my wish will also accumulate virtue for yourself. Surely you are not so narrow-minded that you would offend the Celestial Lord and insist on fighting me over a man. You will suffer heavenly punishment." At that time, the one who firmly stood out to oppose her was not my father, nor the civil and military officials. It was Peihan. After his moment of shock, his face immediately showed resolve. "For the grace of saving my life, I can repay her with death. But in this life, my place beside your highness is firm as bedrock. I recognize only your highness." Peihan did not agree, and none of the officials spoke. Because of that, my father could not grant Feng Jinwu's request. My blade had not even left its sheath before her wish dissolved into smoke. She did not hate Peihan for seeking the new and abandoning the old. Instead, she hated me to the bone for stealing her love. After that, she stopped me outside the palace gates and said smugly, "That day, when I saved him at the foot of the mountain, he and I had already shared a physical bond. We tangled together for 3 days and 3 nights without rest. Do you know why? Because my face is exactly like the woman he once loved. You may have his body, but you will never have his heart. Sooner or later, he will belong to me." I indifferently lifted my eyelids and was slowly walking out. With great interest, I asked, "Is that so?" Peihan's face instantly turned pale. By instinct, he stepped forward and stood between Feng Jinwu and me. "My loyalty has never changed. I have absolutely no other thoughts." Slap. Before Peihan finished speaking, my maid's cold slap landed squarely on Feng Jinwu's face. Slandering an official of the court is a grave crime, punishable by 30 strokes as a warning. Feng Jinwu held her reddened cheek and gnashed her teeth. "A lowly mortal maid dares strike me? Slap. This slap was delivered by my own hand. I used 70% of my strength and knocked her to the ground at once. She opened her mouth and spat blood. Peihan stepped forward again, blocking me. "She's my benefactor." I gave a soft hum. Disrespecting a princess before the crowd deserves 10 strikes to warn others. Peihan's breath caught. I mocked him. After all, she is the prince consort's benefactor. Feng Jinwu's curses were not faster than my guard's hand. "On what grounds do you slap? Do you believe I slap? I am the phoenix. Slap. You slap." By the 5th slap, all the arrogant words in her belly were finally beaten silent. My guard came from the army. 3 punches from him could kill an ox. One could imagine the force behind his hand. After the final slap, Feng Jinwu spat out blood and broken teeth, then fainted from the pain. From beginning to end, Peihan only lowered his head, as if he had neither heard nor seen anything. Only I noticed that the fist clenched beneath his sleeve was bulging with veins. After being humiliated before everyone, Feng Jinwu turned to rely on noble consort Wen Jin and her son. She was determined to fight me to the death. I had spent quite some effort finding a top-grade Fergana horse. I planned to raise it in the princess manner and personally order people to train it carefully. After it became a true warhorse, I would send it into the military camp to breed and strengthen our cavalry. But the moment that horse was brought to the manor's riding ground, Feng Jinwu set her eyes on it. She stood on the viewing platform, raised her hand and whistled sharply. The horse immediately became agitated. It broke free of the trainer, smashed through the railing, and charged out. Along the way, it ran wildly and nearly trampled passers-by several times. Feng Jinwu acted as if she did not see. Only when the horse followed the whistle and galloped before her did she leisurely leap onto its back. She seized the reins, urged the horse straight into the Eastern Palace's riding ground, and presented the horse she had picked up as a gift to please the crown prince. The steward of my manor, pale with alarm, went to demand it back. Feng Jinwu crossed her arms and stood before the crown prince. Right under the eyes of many nobles watching, she said boldly, "You say this is Princess Shunzhen's horse? If you call it Princess Shunzhen's horse, will it answer you? I say this is His Highness the Crown Prince's horse. Since ancient times, a fine horse matches a hero. Go back and tell your Princess Shunzhen that not everything in this world belongs to whoever came first. His Highness the Crown Prince is the one chosen by heaven, so naturally he deserves the only Fergana horse of its kind in the world." Pei Han knew my temper very well. He originally intended to lead the horse back and then come before me to accept punishment. But Feng Jinwu stopped him firmly where he stood. "Pei Han, although you are only a mortal, at least you are a man. If it were me, I would rather die with honor than live in disgrace. I would never be content to serve as an ox or horse for an ugly princess. When you wake in the middle of the night and see that face, do you not have nightmares? If you truly love her, how could you have been so tangled with me that we nearly died and came back to life? In the end, you still love beauty. You are only bowing to her power for now. But soon I will have those things too." She swung the horsewhip, raised her neck arrogantly, and turned to leave. "I picked up this horse. It has now been given to His Highness the Crown Prince. If she wants it back, have her come find me herself." The Fergana horse I had painstakingly found and planned to raise into a warhorse was imprisoned in the Eastern Palace just like that. I picked up my blade and intended to fight all the way to the Eastern Palace gates. But Pei Han was already waiting beneath the corridor. On his back was a bundle of thorny rods wrapped tight. His inner robe had almost been dyed red. The moment he saw me, he knelt. "I beg your highness to stay your hand. Jinwu once saved my life." The rain was heavy. A pool of bloody water spread beneath the knees. We confronted each other in the pouring rain for a long time, until his body could no longer hold and began to sway. Then I suddenly saw the old wound on his left shoulder. That was a debt I still owed him. In the end, I withdrew my blade, placed the horsewhip in my guard's hand, and turned away decisively. "This once only. From now on, I owe you nothing. A servant who betrays his master receives 30 lashes. Pei Han is no exception." That night, each strike of the horsewhip tore through his back and left blood soaking the rain. He fainted in the downpour and was finally carried back. My maid said worriedly, "I fear the prince consort's heart will grow distant from your highness because of this." I kept looking at the letter, just sent back from the border, and did not even raise my head. Have I ever begged for his heart? But although my blade had been withdrawn, this matter was not over. Noble's consort Wen Jin had been suppressed by my maternal family for many years. Now she finally tasted the feeling of making me suffer through a pheasant spirit. She held banquets for 3 consecutive days to entertain the so-called Phoenix Fairy, showing off her joy and satisfaction. To gouge deeper into my heart, she even had the Crown Prince personally organize a horse race. They wanted to use my own Fergana horse to defeat my 10-year undefeated record, then trample on me in humiliation. Unfortunately, they forgot that I was the one who had found that horse, and no one else was allowed to touch what was mine. On the racetrack, when Chen Huaidu swore he would compete with me, Feng Jinwu predictably used her whistle again to manipulate the horse's emotions. But this time, the horsewhip in my hand cracked through the air. The horse that was charging madly toward me suddenly neighed. Carrying the Crown Prince, it fought its way through layers of barriers and rammed straight toward Feng Jinwu on the viewing stand. Feng Jinwu was thrown from the high platform and hit the ground hard. Her hairpin scattered, her hair came loose, and her clothes were torn. Her face was pale, and the horse's hooves were already raised. In another instant, she would have been trampled. The guards immediately drew their blades and rushed forward. Just as the nearest spear was about to stab the horse's neck, the horse trainer suddenly whistled. The fine horse immediately pulled back its hooves, twisted its body, and threw the crown prince from its back. He crashed hard to the ground and rolled several yards away. Then the horse turned and galloped straight toward me. When I urged my horse past the finish line and won the laurel, it immediately ran to my side and kept rubbing its head against me, aggrieved yet affectionate. The crown prince's head was injured, and 3 of his ribs were broken. Feng Jinwu, also heavily injured, lay in Pei Han's arms with breath as thin as a thread. Noble consort Wenjin hated me so much her eyes seemed to bleed. You plotted against the crown prince. What crime should you bear? I faced her coldly. My things do not become yours, simply because you seized them. What happened today is only the beginning. The whole capital knew that the crown prince had forcibly kept my horse. I organized this horse race precisely so that mother and son would swallow the bitter fruit they had planted. Sure enough, the civil and military officials began to mention my military achievements, my late mother, and how my maternal's family had all been loyal military officers. At the same time, they criticized the crown prince for lacking virtue. Noble consort Wenjin was forced until her body swayed and she nearly could not stand. The state preceptor, who had accepted her bribe, immediately stepped forward to rescue the situation. At the beginning of the month, this minister observed the celestial signs at night and saw abnormalities in the stars. They foretold that Great Yang would soon face a great calamity. His Highness the Crown Prince cared deeply for the state and resolved to bear this disaster. This minister therefore begged the phoenix to sacrifice herself and assist. Today, dragon and phoenix both shed blood, and the calamity has finally been resolved. The prince consort also knows this clearly. Everyone's gaze immediately fell on Pei Han, who stood with lowered eyes in silence. He hesitated. Noble consort Wenjin reminded him, the matter of controlling a fierce horse and injuring the crown prince concerns the fate of the nation. Prince consort, think carefully before you answer. Feng Jinwu's whistle could control the emotions of fierce horses. The one who stole my fine horse was her. The one who made the crown prince's horse lose control on the racetrack was also her. Noble consort Wenjin was using Feng Jinwu's life to threaten Pei Han. In the past, he was someone who never submitted to threats. He once said that at worst, it was only death. He was not afraid. But this time, he did not dare look me in the eye. He looked sadly at the wounded Feng Jinwu. Then he slowly nodded. This matter this minister knows. My father immediately burst into laughter and praised him. Unchanged in the face of danger, brave and resourceful, with the nation in his heart, Huaidu truly resembles the late emperor. We are very comforted. Noble consort Wenjin breathed a sigh of relief. After giving me a venomous glance, she stepped forward and said, Jinwu sacrificed herself for righteousness, helping the crown prince and the state preceptor resolve this calamity together. She has not failed the great righteousness of a fairy. She is even more worthy of the title Divine Phoenix Guardian of the state, bearing the fate of Great Yang. Your Majesty is wise, and gods and men have both witnessed this. That is why Great Yang received this heaven-sent blessing. Hearing this, the civil and military officials all knelt. Your Majesty is wise. While my father was delighted, noble consort Wenjin glanced at Pei Han and, as if rewarding him, persuaded my father to confer Feng Jinwu as Princess Yongning. Though the fairy does not care for fame and profit in the mortal realm, having a title will make it convenient for her to act and prevent her from being bullied by wicked people. When she said the words wicked people, she deliberately glanced at me. My father met my gaze and the smile on his face gradually faded. Granted, to pray for Great Yang's lasting prosperity, he especially permitted Feng Jinwu and the state preceptor to pray for blessings on behalf of the world. After that, the crown prince deliberately named Pei Han, ordering him to be stationed frequently at Princess Yongning's manor to assist them. It was both a means of winning him over and driving a wedge between us. It was also a precisely calculated move to plant disaster inside the princess manor. I sat in the courtyard sharpening my blade and waited to see Pei Han's attitude. He returned very late. His cloak still carried the chill of deep night, mixed with the faint fragrance from Feng Jinwu. My hand paused on the whetstone. With a gloomy expression, Pei Han said to me, ruler and subject come first, husband and wife come second. I cannot disobey the crown prince's order. I immediately understood. I raised my eyes to him and said, today to protect her, you pushed me into an unjust position. That means you have stood on the side of my enemies. Do you know what this means? Pei Han lifted his head and looked at me. The resolve in his eyes was clear under the lamplight. Then he lowered his head again. Loyalty and righteousness are difficult to fulfill at the same time. This minister has wronged your highness. My face cooled. With a sweep of my hand, I drove my blade through his arm. I do not listen to apologies. What you owe me, my blade will collect for itself. As soon as the words fell, I pushed the blade another inch deeper into his flesh. Blood quickly dyed his cloak red. Pain that seemed to pierce through bone reddened his eyes, but he clenched his teeth and did not utter even a groan. Still not enough to calm my anger. My hands slowly tightened on the hilt. The sharp blade began to twist little by little in his arm. Cold sweat covered Peihan's forehead. His face turned pale from pain. His fingers clenched so hard his nails cut into his palms, leaving his whole hand wet with blood. This minister knows he was wrong. Only when the blade scraped bone did I finally let go. You have only one chance to betray me. Today I am not sparing you because I am soft-hearted. It is because outside the princess manor, countless eyes and ears of the noble consort are waiting to seize my flaw, so I have no choice but to stop. But Peihan, the person you were died tonight. All that remains is to choose an auspicious day for your burial. I looked down from above at his painful, weakened figure as he held his arm. In the end, I left him with one cold sentence. Every day from now on, you had better live very carefully. I lifted my foot to leave, but he suddenly called out, Your Highness. I stopped. His voice was urgent. Jinwoo injured her leg. Said Your Highness once used a special medicine for external injuries on campaign. I beg Your Highness to save her. I laughed coldly and continued walking without hesitation. I do not have it. Even if I did, I would rather feed it to dogs than use it on her. Those words struck Peihan, who had remained kneeling, like a heavy blow. His body swayed and almost collapsed. He was helped out of the courtyard by guards. The cold wind rushed in and blew against his back, already soaked with cold sweat. I sighed softly. In the end, he still is not him. When I said I had no good medicine, that was the truth. If I truly had such divine medicine, I would not have lost the position of heir because of the scar on my face. But Peihan clearly did not believe me. Despite the wound in his arm, he went begging to my old acquaintances and former subordinates. After returning empty-handed again and again, resentment gradually gathered in his heart. He truly thought that one blade through his arm was enough to settle all the grace and debts between us. From then on, he openly colluded with noble consort Wenjin and her son. When I hosted a banquet, he used the excuse of accompanying Feng Jinwoo to the observatory platform to watch the stars and did not even show his face. Instead, he stayed with her at Star-Plucking Tower all night, watching heavenly fire meteors. After I chanted sutras for my late mother, who had been surrounded and killed outside the suburbs by the Crown Prince's men, he rode through the streets with Feng Jinwoo and bought a whole cart of hairpins, bracelets, and jewelry. When the state preceptor and Feng Jinwoo used the excuse that I was an ill omen and pressed me step by step to leave the capital for my fief, he only lowered his eyes and indifferently turned the pearl bracelet Feng Jinwoo had personally strung around his wrist. From beginning to end, he did not say a word. Though we bore the name of husband and wife and lived under the same roof, between us there seemed to be an abyss that could not be crossed. We were strangers. Again and again, Feng Jinwoo boasted in front of everyone. I told you long ago. You may have his person, but you cannot have his heart. Heaven's mandate cannot be reasoned with. A mortal wants to fight the mandate of heaven? If she does not lose face, who will? Oh, I forgot. Her face is already ruined. What dignity is there left to lose? How pitiful. No wonder Peihan does not want to stay at the princess manor. Looking at that face truly makes one sick. She laughed until her body trembled like a flower branch. Slap. I struck her with one slap and sent her rolling off the steps. Just as my blade was about to pierce her throat, Peihan rushed over and gripped the blade with his bare hand. The crown prince is here. I ask your highness to consider carefully before acting. Chen Huaidu looked down at me from above. She is a princess, personally conferred by Father Emperor, and also the auspicious guardian of Great Yang. Imperial sister may kill her if she wishes. I need not say more. When the time comes, the accusations of the civil and military officials will naturally make Imperial sister fall beyond redemption. Feng Jinwoo held her swollen cheek and glared at me fiercely. If you cannot keep a man's heart, you kill a woman to vent your anger. A princess of Great Yang amounts to only this. I laughed. And you? After becoming my defeated opponent again and again, is this helpless rage all you can do? Her pupils shrank slightly, and her teeth ground together, because time and again she had laid plots but not once had she truly calculated clearly. At the banquet, they wanted to isolate me and turn me into a joke. Unexpectedly, the very star-plucking tower, where the two of them were staying, caught fire. The two escaped the sea of flames in a sorry state and ended up branded as disaster stars descending upon the world. When the crown prince confidently used a diversion to send people to surround and kill me, I also used a lure to draw the snake from its cave and rewarded Chen Huaidu, whose defenses had opened, with a heavy arrow. It left him bedridden for half a month. Even when my father had just begun thinking of expelling me to my fief, he suddenly got drunk, fell into the lake, and was frightened into a serious illness after believing my late mother was choking him. He immediately gave up the idea of driving me from the capital. Thinking of these things, Feng Jinwu's eyes reddened with resentment. So what if you win? After all this fighting, to this day you are still alone and empty-handed. If I were you, I would rather die. With a thud, I put all my strength into a kick to her abdomen. The force sent her flying several yards away. She crashed through 3 wooden tables before collapsing limply and coughing blood. Chen Huaidu's expression changed. Just as he was about to act, I raised my eyes and smiled. Tonight, you personally brought 30 secret guards. Is that true? His pupils contracted and he backed away. The moment my maid's hand touched the blade at her waist, he immediately leapt through the window and fled faster than lightning. All the guests in the tavern were stunned. I laughed contemptuously. This princess brought only one maid, yet frightened the crown prince into fleeing for his life. Is he cowardly and useless, or is this princess simply too strong and fierce? My blade lay across Pei Han's neck. My maid's embroidered shoe stepped on Feng Jinwu's chest. With only one look from me, Pei Han's throat would be cut at once, and Feng Jinwu's ribs would be crushed beneath my maid's foot. His throat moved. His voice was so low it was almost inaudible. Of course the crown prince was frightened. Hearing this, I withdrew my hand. I could kill, but I did not kill. That was my bearing and dignity. The crown prince should have stayed, but instead he fled. That was his incompetence and cowardice. That was exactly how storytellers and civil officials described it later. The crown prince lost all reputation, and Feng Jinwu was badly injured. From then on, they and I could not share the same sky. Between us, only one side could survive. Until the winter solstice, the state preceptor and Feng Jinwu raised the banner of defying heaven and changing fate for the people of Great Yang. They announced that they would perform the final grand ritual to destroy the evil spirit and protect the people's peace. Pei Han stood in the courtyard for a very long time, so long that the tea in my hand had gone cold. Only then did he hide a lock of hair that had once belonged to me in his sleeve and decisively turn toward the ritual ground. That was the final blow Feng Jinwu wanted to use to draw heavenly fire down upon me. They regarded me as a demon among mortals, and swore that they would summon heavenly thunder to destroy the evil spirit. Before the civil and military officials, while the two of them loudly recited incantations, flocks of birds carrying sparks followed the scent on that lock of black hair and flew into the capital. They were determined to ruin me completely. But amid the cries of crows filling the sky, I curved my lips and laughed, because those sparks had silently fallen into noble consort Wenjin's imperial residence. Filled with confidence, Feng Jinwu shouted, "Break!" In an instant, shocking flames suddenly burst from noble consort Wenjin's residence. Feng Jinwu's expression changed at once. How could this be? The crows had followed the scent of the hair. Could it be that the lock of hair was not Chen Shunzhen? The state preceptor trembled all over. Tonight his majesty is resting in the noble consort's palace. Setting fire to the son of heaven is a great crime punishable by the execution of an entire clan. Pei Han also froze where he stood. The hair on her wooden comb, how did it become the noble consort's hair? His pupils widened suddenly. She had guarded against me long ago. He finally understood, but it was too late. The fire meant to destroy the demoness who bewitched the nation grew more and more violent, quickly devouring the entire residence. It burned the courtyard full of imperial rewards noble consort Wenjin had always been proud of. It also badly burned father's arm while he was resting there, and it destroyed the beautiful face father loved most. Of course, I watched enough of that fine play before leisurely entering the imperial palace amid her cries. Heavenly punishment had descended upon the palace, and noble consort Wenjin had been burned by fire. She was immediately regarded as an evil spirit. Outside the palace, commoners knelt and begged for the noble consort to be punished. Inside the hall, the officials all prostrated themselves and remonstrated, begging His Majesty to follow heaven's will and execute the demon consort to dispel disaster. The cowardly Chen Huaidu had been born from the demon consort's belly, so his position as crown prince also began to shake violently. The blade they had meant to stab into me had ultimately pierced their own hearts. Noble consort Wenjin's burns left her screaming until her voice turned hoarse. The crown prince was full of hatred and alternated between kicking and cursing the imperial physicians. My father was even more furious, but he could not bear to punish the noble consort. So he pushed out the state preceptor, blaming him for mishandling the ritual. The state preceptor was beaten 30 strokes, and Feng Jinwu was stripped of her title as princess. Just before the two of them were driven from the capital, Pei Han stepped out with a gloomy gaze and pleaded for Feng Jinwu. To accomplish a great undertaking for the world, setbacks are unavoidable. This time, defying heaven led to a slight accident. It is understandable. They should be given a chance to redeem themselves through merit. For the sake of Great Yang's century of peace, let them try one more time. This minister is willing to guarantee with his life that this time, it will certainly succeed. That chance to redeem themselves was my birthday banquet today. Pei Han had not prepared a gift, so he temporarily offered a painting of me on horseback. But after a visit to the study, the painting carried out from the study had become an ugly pig-headed face. Feng Jinwu held the painting and used that pig-headed face to provoke me. In the end, I cut off one of her wings, plucked every feather from her body, and turned her into a bare chicken. Pei Han had just left carrying the featherless mixed-breed chicken when thunder and lightning rolled in, and heavy rain poured down like a waterfall. The corner of my lips curved. Heaven's timing, earthly advantage, and human-made fire were all on my side. In the next instant, a shocking bolt of thunder came down. It did not miss by even an inch. It struck my bedchamber exactly. The state preceptor had just received the news. He carried a demon-slaying sword and broke through the door. Abusing a fairy has angered heaven and earth. Hurry and offer the blood of your heart to beg the celestial lord for forgiveness. I drew my blade decisively, suddenly turned, and cut off his head with one strike. The state preceptor's head rolled several yards away. His eyes, not yet closed, were still wide with disbelief and terror. Everyone present was shocked. After all, the state preceptor was my father's trusted aide and bore the important duty of protecting the nation and calming the people. By openly abusing a fairy and killing the state preceptor, I seemed to be opposing both the way of heaven and my father. Especially because a bolt of heavenly thunder had just struck above my head, it pushed me into the eye of the storm. But just as everyone trembled and prepared to stand and take their leave, a guard hurried in. Holding up a chicken burned black, he deliberately shouted in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "Disaster!" When the prince consort carried the mixed feathered chicken past your highness's bedchamber, both were struck by heavenly thunder. The mixed breed chicken has become roast chicken, and the prince consort has only one breath left. I gave a soft hum. So the one struck by lightning was not this princess. The daughter of the true dragon has in the end defeated the false phoenix. Whom does heaven's mandate favor? It is already clear. The one chosen by heaven is this princess. Then I looked at the state preceptor's body and said coldly, even heaven's mandate has been misread again and again. This demon priest clearly intended to disrupt Great Yong's national fate. Naturally, he must be killed without mercy. The entire hall fell silent. Only the rain continued to fall, pattering without end. Rainwater struck his body and carried blood into a winding stream. If the demoness who bewitched the nation is not me, then those who deserve to die without burial are naturally them. I lifted my narrow eyes and looked coldly toward the courtyard gate. Clang! He had arrived. The door was pushed open. A guard rushed in panic. Disaster! The crown prince has taken the Eastern Palace tiger tally and forced his way into the princess manor. As soon as the words fell, Chen Huaidu, whom I had been waiting for, strode in. Seeing the state preceptor's head separated from his body, his pupils contracted. He immediately shouted sternly, abusing a fairy and killing the state preceptor? Chen Shunzhen, your crimes reach heaven. Surrender at once. He drew his sword. Its tip pointed straight between my brows, as if he were determined to make blood flow here today. The guests in the courtyard panicked, all trembling. The corner of my lips lifted. The crown prince holds the Eastern Palace tiger tally, leads troops into the princess manor, and draws a sword against his own bloodkin. This is overstepping authority and seizing power. Does Father Emperor know about this? The crown prince glanced sideways at me, his contemptuous gaze as if looking at a fool. You abused a fairy, destroyed the state preceptor, offended heaven above, and disrupted court order below. Since I am the one chosen by heaven's mandate, I naturally must bear responsibility for the world, act on heaven's behalf in time, and destroy a disaster like you to calm heaven's anger and the people's resentment. I laughed contemptuously. So Father Emperor does not know. More than half the noblewomen and young ladies of the capital's honored families are here. Does the crown prince truly wish to ignore their lives and charge into my manor with blades? With one sentence, I dragged everyone into the water. Chen Huaidu's phoenix eyes narrowed. Destroying the demoness who harms the nation is urgent and cannot be delayed. Kill her for me. The women in the courtyard had long been frightened out of their wits. They all knelt to the ground in a dark mass. Chaotic pleas for mercy rose one after another. Your Highness, calm your anger. We women did not participate. We are all innocent. Please let us out. We were all forced here by the princess. The killing intent around Chen Huaidu was too heavy. After finally grasping a chance to make me die without a place to be buried, he did not hesitate to risk acting first and reporting later by forcing his way into the princess manor. He absolutely would not let this chance go. So he tightened his grip on his sword. I am only destroying the evil spirit that harms the nation. Step aside and you will be safe. But blades had no eyes. Where could they step aside to? Those words were only meant to leave him room to beg forgiveness later. Everyone prostrated themselves on the ground, trembling like grain in a sieve. I lowered my eyes and swept them over the crowd. Then I shouted sternly, "The Crown Prince, in order to force a false crime onto this princess, does not hesitate to kill witnesses and slaughter the women and children of the capital's honored families. With such virtue, what right does he have to bear the position of heir? You want to kill this princess? Then all the more reason I must save people. Men, even if you must risk your lives, escort the madams and young ladies into the underground passage." Countless hidden guards descended from above, holding long blades and waiting to strike. The crime had already been pinned on the Crown Prince. Before he had time to speak, my blade left its sheath. Slash. With one sweep, I cut down the first man. Then another slash rang out. The first soldier who rushed forward was cut down by my blade. I had spent many years rolling through battlefields. Killing was as easy to me as cutting melons and vegetables. My movements were so decisive that blood had already splashed onto Chen Huaidu's face before he could recover. Kill! Slash after slash, another man fell. Long blades flew. The great blades blocking the noblewomen came down again and again, cutting a path through the enemy. The women, as if granted amnesty, were shielded by guards. Some crawled, rushing in panic toward the secret door that had opened among the artificial rocks. After the last person entered, the heavy stone door rumbled down and completely separated inside from outside. "You do not know life from death. Today I will kill every last one of your people and leave not a scrap behind." Chen Huaidu's face turned savage. I let out a long breath. I have waited for this day for a very long time. At the instant the crowd surged forward, my body suddenly shot out. I reversed my grip on the long blade and, carrying cold wind and killing intent, charged straight to the Crown Prince. The dense ranks of guards were forcibly torn open by my subordinates and me. Cold light flashed. My long blade rested steadily against Chen Huaidu's neck. The blade pressed close to his skin. With only a slight force, I could take his life at once. "Everyone, retreat." My long skirt was stained with blood, and a wound had appeared on my face. At that moment, I looked like a fierce ghost that had just crawled up from hell. Chen Huaidu's face turned pale. The blade in my hand pressed another inch deeper. Blood slid down the back of the blade and dripped onto his brocade robe, quickly staining a large patch over the golden dragon pattern on his chest. "If you dare kill me, that is rebellion." The blade pressed deeper again. Pain twisted Chen Huaidu's face. "Retreat!" The guards feared harming him and could only withdraw step by step, but they had no road left. Within the sealed courtyard, countless repeating crossbows had been secretly arranged in advance. As soon as distance opened between the two sides, the sound of bolts tearing through the air suddenly rang out. Thousands of arrows fired together, dense as a rainstorm. The Eastern Palace personal guards had no time to dodge and fell one after another. In moments, bodies lay scattered across the courtyard, armor broken, and blood flowed slowly through the seams of the blue bricks. The forces under Chen Huaidu had been cut off at the root. His life had completely fallen into the palm of my hand. Now the courtyard was filled with my manor guards. Each wore full armor, fierce enough to fight 10 men alone. Chen Huaidu was both shocked and afraid. "Those are repeating crossbows used on the battlefield. You secretly raised private soldiers. That is a crime equal to rebellion. Father Emperor will definitely kill you. But now he can no longer kill me." Before his eyes, I took out the military tally. "Your people at the border have been wiped clean. The military power of my maternal family has now returned to my hands." "If that is so, how far is the throne from me?" Chen Huaidu finally knew fear. "Even if you kill me, you cannot sit on the imperial throne." "Why not?" Slash. My wrist turned sharply. The long blade cut straight across the right side of his face. Blood poured out and dyed half his robe. His whole body shook from the pain, and a cry burst from his throat. I smiled down at him from above. "To make sure you sat steadily in the Eastern Palace. Father Emperor could not bear to completely discard me, the blade that protects the rivers and mountains. So he deliberately ruined half my face. A father's debt is paid by the son. Today, you will first repay a bit of interest for him." Chen Huaidu clutched the injured half of his face. "You are mad. You dare wound me? Father Emperor will never slash." He could not continue. I swung the blade down and cut off one of his arms. "This is the price Father Emperor must pay for paving the road for him." Seizing my military authority and cutting off my foundation, Chen Huaidu cried out in pain. "Chen Shunzhen, you vile woman! Why did you not die with that vile mother of yours in Chenyang Palace? I only hate that I let you escape to the border back then and could not kill you with my own hands. Father Emperor was too weak. Killing your entire maternal clan and ruining your face was still not enough. He should have cut off your limbs and dragged you back to the capital, forcing you to live on my charity. Vile woman, I want you dead. I want..." Thud. While he was still cursing, I swung my blade with precision and destroyed his left eye. The bone-deep pain made his whole body convulse. He clutched his left eye socket and rolled on the ground, no longer having the strength to keep insulting me. I smiled and said, "You had eyes but failed to see. After searching for so many years, you only found a mixed feathered chicken and a charlatan pretending to be a master. You treated them as blades to kill me. These eyes of yours truly do not need to remain." He cried out repeatedly and nearly fainted. Only then did I straighten and look with interest toward Pei Han, who stood beneath the corridor, his face deathly pale. "How are my methods? In the end, was I still one move better, defeating all your painstaking schemes?" Pei Han's mouth was gagged, his whole body was bound, and he was escorted before me. With a thud, a guard kicked the back of his knees, forcing him to kneel at my feet. The tip of my blade had just lifted Chen Huaidu's injured eye. I used it to gently hook down the cloth gagging Pei Han's mouth. I said, "Today is the auspicious day this princess personally selected with care to send my prince consort to his grave. My birthday, and the day of your death. Do you like it?" Pei Han's whole body shook. You knew long ago there would be today? How could I not know? The so-called person chosen by heaven's mandate, as spoken by the phoenix herself, was only meant to borrow the words of gods and Buddhas, to silence the civil and military officials, who were already dissatisfied with the Eastern Palace. Feng Jinwu mocked my ruined face again and again to remind the world that Great Yang could not have a ruler whose face was scarred. Step by step, scheme after scheme, every calculation was meant to steadily push that useless crown prince, already doubted by the officials, onto the imperial throne. Unfortunately, my father could not bear to discard me, Great Yang's fiercest military general. No matter what, he refused to take my life. That was why noble consort Wen Jin and her son decided to risk everything. They used the thunderstorm to set a trap, luring me into action, using heavenly lightning to frame me and make the world believe I had damaged the nation's fate and suffered divine punishment. From there, they would push me to my death. The scheme linked one ring to the next and was indeed very tight. But the study was an important place in my manor. 3 hidden guards alone were stationed there. How could a lightning-attracting needle secretly hidden inside escape my eyes? As for the fact that the false phoenix was actually only a pheasant spirit, I had known that long ago. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will not lose 100 battles. I would never allow an enemy I knew nothing about to hop around under my eyes. I wanted her dead, but her death had to have value. Borrowing the force of heaven, I knew how to do that too. The lightning-attracting needle had already been placed by my guard under the wing of that disgraced, bare-feathered chicken. So, before Pei Han's own eyes, right in the courtyard of my manor, she was struck by heavenly thunder and burned into roast chicken. That was the reward others had begged me to grant the prince consort. I fulfilled it. Was he happy? Before Pei Han had time to grieve losing the woman he loved once more, he heard that the state preceptor had followed the original plan, held the Son of Heaven's imperial token, and led men into the princess manor. When Pei Han realized he had fallen into my trap, he panicked and ran to stop them. The moment our gazes met through the crack of the door, he was struck on the head with a staff and fainted where he stood. By the time a blade woke him, everything had already been arranged. They had never imagined that simply carrying a roast chicken could turn heaven and earth upside down and bring the dead back to life in another form. Pei Han's face held no blood. His body trembled under the brocade robe. "You truly are exactly as they said. You repay every slight and are ruthless and cruel-hearted. I never wanted you dead, but you never thought of letting me live. In the end, this minister was wrong. But I only wanted to protect the person in my heart. I only wanted to protect her. Where was I wrong? The wealth and glory she wanted in the past, this minister could not give. The path of survival she needed, this minister could not obtain. It was not easy to meet someone who resembled her. Those regrets, those inner demons, those missing pieces that once made this minister hurt until he no longer wanted to live, all could be made up through Jinwu. This minister only wanted to make up through Jinwu for what I had missed with the other woman, to complete the regret in my heart. Your Highness, where was this minister wrong? I bent down and placed the blade against Pei Han's neck. You were wrong because you should never have stood against me. You were wrong because your skill was inferior and you lost to me today. And you were even more wrong because, even at death's door, you still do not know where you went wrong. You did not expect that the charge of suffering heavenly punishment would ultimately fall on the false phoenix you raised with your own hands. You did not expect that after I beheaded the charlatan state preceptor before everyone, I not only did not lose the people's hearts, but instead won them. You expected even less that the crown prince had never been my opponent. My eyes darkened. Slash. One cold stroke cut Pei Han's throat. In the instant his eyes widened in shock. Blood welled from his mouth and he fell. I calmly straightened and continued coldly. Moreover, he forced his way into the princess manor and, using baseless charges, tried to kill me. When he failed, he killed my prince consort instead. Naturally, I must enter the palace to demand justice, depose the Eastern Palace, and take back everything that should have belonged to me. From beginning to end, my enemy was never any of you. It was the supreme ruler sitting safely on that high throne. Your tangled obsessive love was only the staircase that sent me to the clouds. I waited a very long time to receive this flawed dead end. Thank you for handing it to me yourself. The crown prince of the Eastern Palace had his face ruined and body crippled. The prince consort's body and head lay apart. Beside them was the charred, featherless roast chicken. All of it was placed neatly in the court hall, not only striking my hypocritical father across the face, but also exposing the entire plot of noble consort Wen Jin and her son under the light. After the noble madams and young ladies who had hidden in the artificial rockery hurried home, they immediately reported everything to their family heads. They insisted that the crown prince had used a non-existent crime to lead troops into the princess manor, openly tried to force the princess to her death, and attempt to wash the entire manor in blood. Even those like them, who had learned the truth, had not been spared. If the princess had not risked her life to save them, defenseless women, such as they would certainly have died without intact bodies, the crown prince had no virtue. Now his face was ruined, and he had lost an arm. What qualification did he still have to inherit the great line? The civil and military officials knelt and refused to rise, only begging that the position of the Eastern Palace be abolished. My father remained silent. But what I wanted was far more than that. I only gave a look, and someone immediately sent news of the crown prince's crushing defeat to Guanshu Palace. Noble consort Wen Jin, whose face had been ruined, was now no different from a madwoman. Holding the token my father had granted her, she rushed crazily straight into the court hall. Crying and shrieking, she threw herself toward the crown prince. Then she pointed her long nails straight at me and cursed madly. It was you. You were the one who plotted against Huaidu. You plotted against mother and son. I will kill you. Before anyone could react, she suddenly pulled the hairpin from her hair and lunged wildly toward me. But just as the tip was about to strike me, I suddenly reached out and gripped her wrist. I twisted her hand back and used that very hairpin to pierce her throat. Wen Jin! Father called out too late. Blood stained his eyes. The feeling of watching the person one loved most die before one's eyes while being powerless to do anything. My father, do you now understand the pain that once tore my heart apart? I curved my lips in a cold smile, my eyes full of hatred. Right before my father, I put strength into my arm and drove the hairpin through noble consort Wen Jin's slender neck. The noble consort's beautiful peach blossom eyes widened. With a thud, she fell to the ground. Her bright red palace dress spread across the main hall. She was like a gorgeous poppy, beautiful yet poisonous. My father was shocked and fell heavily back onto the dragon throne. Noble consort Wen Jin had once defeated my mother and nearly destroyed my entire life. How could her methods not have been brilliant? Unfortunately, methods alone were not enough. One also needed the power and wisdom to deliver a fatal strike. For example, the military tally now in my hand had already become a cold blade pressed against my father's neck. He hated me, but he had missed the best chance to kill me. My father, grieving the loss of the person he loved, raised his trembling hand and pointed helplessly at me. But when I only raised my brows slightly and looked at him with mocking lips, he immediately spat blood and collapsed, unable to rise. My father's descendants were few. Beneath his knees, there were only me and Chen Huaidu. Chen Huaidu's body was crippled, his face ruined, and his pain left him wishing he were dead. He could not possibly come to serve at my father's sickbed. Beside my father, only I remained. I sat beside the bed and asked softly, "The words of people are frightening. Father Emperor, do you now feel troubled?" His pupils trembled, hatred surging in his eyes. "You did this on purpose. You used my own blade to stab my heart." I shook my head. "I merely used the same domineering method Father Emperor once used to take everything from me to reclaim what belonged to me, my military power for his arms and legs, the scar on my face for his ruined appearance, and the position of heir, along with the imperial throne that should have belonged to me. Father Emperor, will you hand it to me yourself, or shall I take it myself?" My father was terrified. He coughed violently while hurling insults at me, but I treated them as if I had not heard. I summoned a guard, pointed at the objects in his hands and asked in a low voice, "Back then, when Father Emperor killed my mother, which method did you use?" The guard lowered his head. On the tray he held were poisoned wine, a dagger, and a white silk sash. "When you needed a military general, my mother was the crown princess Father Emperor could not obtain no matter how much you begged. When you finished using her, she became only cold bones in Shenyang Palace. I was young then, but I was not stupid. My mother was highly skilled in martial arts and unmatched in courage. How could she possibly have died merely from a cold? My father's dry eyes, like a dead well, trembled slightly. Killing the sovereign and usurping the throne are both capital crimes. Do you no longer want to live? I cut him off coldly. Not only do I want to live, I also want to be emperor. I turned the dagger in my hand and laughed contemptuously. But Father Emperor, if you do not die, I cannot be at ease. If so, I can only send Chen Huaidu on his way first and completely cut off your hope. The guard beside me immediately accepted the dagger. No, my father cut me off in panic, his whole body trembling. He understood my methods very well. I always did what I said. On that face, which had always worn false benevolence, true pain finally appeared. We wronged Wenjin. The Empress's position we once promised her was ultimately given, under the late Emperor's pressure, to your mother, who came from a military family. Wenjin spent her life bowing beneath another woman. We failed her. Do not touch Huaidu anymore. We can give the throne to you. We only ask that you let Huaidu live out the rest of his life in peace. He is no longer a threat to you. Let him go, all right? But the imperial decree appointing me imperial crown princess, the female heir apparent, had long been stamped with the jade seal by me. What I wanted was for him to publicly abdicate and personally hand the throne to me. My father's lips trembled. Must you be so heartless? One severed finger from Chen Huaidu was presented before him. When he was so frightened he could not sit steadily, I said indifferently, he still has 4 fingers. Every cup of tea, I will take one. That is enough time for Father Emperor to think slowly. If that is still not enough, there are his 2 ears and his remaining eye. I am not in a hurry, I can wait. The crown prince had lost all virtue. Among my father's children, only I remained with outstanding military achievements. The civil and military officials were best at watching the wind and adjusting their sails. The moment my father collapsed, they had already begun to lean toward me one after another. My father understood clearly that the tide had turned against him and Chen Huaidu. In the end, he closed his eyes wearily and ordered the civil and military ministers to enter for an audience. I stood beside my father's bed, in a perfectly respectful posture. But only a door away, all were my soldiers holding blades and awaiting orders. If he said one more sentence that displeased me, those blades would immediately fall on Chen Huaidu. As for the civil and military ministers filling the room, those who obeyed me would live. Those who opposed me would become burial offerings within my father's spoken decree. Only after the verbal decree to abdicate and pass the throne to me was issued were the officials invited out. My father seemed to have used up all his strength. His whole body was weak to the extreme. Now can you let Huaidu go? I did not answer. I only curved my lips coldly and looked down at him from above. Father Emperor, do you know why you have so few descendants? He abruptly looked at me. I delivered the first truth that would leave him unable to die in peace. Because as soon as I was born, my mother drugged you so you could no longer father children. His face instantly turned pale. He struggled to sit up, only to be knocked back down by my next sentence. Father Emperor, guess why Chen Huaidu does not resemble you in the slightest? He seemed to fall into an icy pool, his whole body shivering from cold. So I delivered the final blow. You exhausted your mind and harmed your own blood to pave the road for another man's son. You killed the mother I loved most, ruined my appearance, seized my military power, and in the end even wanted to use an impostor to control me for life. I hate you to the bone, and I will never be like you, leaving a future disaster with my own hands. I pulled over the soft pillow. Under my father's terrified gaze, I delivered the final truth that would make him die with his eyes open. I pressed the pillow firmly over his face. I watched him struggle until his movements gradually weakened. I watched the eyes that had once held the vast rivers and mountains of the realm, the eyes that had once decided the fate of countless people, fill with fear and resentment before slowly losing their light. Only after he had completely stopped moving and no trace of life remained, did I slowly lift the pillow away. Then I drew out a handkerchief and leisurely wiped away the blood that did not exist on my hands. My voice was calm and without a ripple. The retired emperor has passed, with the force of thunder that no one could stop, holding the abdication edict and the jade seal. I wore a bright yellow dragon robe and stood in the great hall. An old minister of the crown prince's faction stepped out to question me. The late emperor's body is not yet cold, and your highness has already altered the decree. I fear it will be difficult to make the world submit. As soon as the words fell, I raised my hand and swung my blade, cutting off his head. It rolled a long way and finally stopped beneath the feet of the watching imperial relatives. I asked, Imperial uncle, what do you think? Kill one to warn 100. The court was shaken. Blood still dripped from the edge of my blade, forcing my imperial uncle to bow his head in submission. Your Majesty succeeds by imperial decree and is the one chosen by heaven's mandate. We ministers are willing to assist your majesty in pacifying the state and protecting the vast rivers and mountains of the realm. The others, even if their hearts held 1,000 unwilling thoughts, no longer dared openly oppose me. The officials all knelt and cried, "Long live your majesty!" Their voices thundered through the imperial city. From above, I looked down at tens of thousands of subjects bowing beneath the steps. My fingertips gently caressed the cold armrest of the dragon throne. I smiled and issued my first imperial decree. Chen Huaidu is rebellious by nature. He disregarded the bonds between siblings, repeatedly pushed his kin into injustice, and had not the slightest filial piety toward father and ruler. Again and again he committed grave offenses and angered the late emperor until his majesty died suddenly. This man has no virtue, no filial piety, and no feeling. He disrupted the imperial clan and harmed his own kin. His crime cannot be pardoned. Drag him to the Meridian Gate and behead him. The inner attendant sucked in a cold breath. I glanced at him indifferently, frightening him into immediately kneeling on the ground. "Your majesty is wise." The civil and military officials hurriedly echoed, "Your majesty is wise." I was very satisfied. The blood-stained blade returned to its sheath. From then on, for decades, I stood at the peak of power and held the vast rivers and mountains of the realm. All under heaven obeyed my command. The four seas honored me as a wise ruler. The seas were calm, the rivers clear, and the prosperous age endured.